seeing tests. That'll be looked at this afternoon a little bit further when we get into delirium, dementia, and depression. Any questions about mental status examination? I know you've had it done before, very important in elderly people. It's very important in exams of elderly people on repetitive visits to always, at a minimum, get orientation to time, person, place. You just have to keep checking it all along to pick up subtle changes. Let's look at environment assessment. And we talked about some of this already a little bit earlier. The environment assessment is usually done by a physical therapist and or a occupational therapist, and we kind of already alluded to that. But there's a thing that you can refer to as an environmental prescription. What kinds of things can be ordered for the environment where the patient will be that will help them be safer and more effective in that environment. So it's called an environmental prescription. And there's several things here that are listed, 1 through 4. Alterations in the physical environment, things like ramps, grab bars, and elevated toilet seats are important things for older people. Special services. Do they need food brought in? Do they need people to help clean house? Do they need home nursing? Okay, and those things, whether that can be paid for or not by some agency or insurance, will be dictated by those assessments that we talked about earlier, the CATs and those different types of systems. But those are necessary to even get the environmental prescription paid for by somebody. Increased social contact. Do they need visits, telephone reinsurance, participation in recreational activities? Some people get isolated, and that does not make life quality any good. And there are folks that will go visit. Let's say they're not really connected to a community that well. You know, some churches will go visit members, some neighbors will come visit with people if it's a kind of a tight community. And you probably see that more in small town rural Oklahoma than you see it in metro areas. You can be in the big city and more isolated than if you live in the country where people actually tend to know how are the people doing around here, and they will tend to reach out and help take care of them. So you can coordinate some social activity and contact. There can be home calls, just periodic, what's going on, how are you doing, do you have enough food, you know, how's your temperature, you know, is your house cold or hot, you know, those kinds of things, just to check on that. And then provision of crucial elements like food and or money. Just those are all part of an environmental prescription, such as you can get it. There's a table I list here, the 10 must-haves for senior safety, and this is part of the environment, and these are actually pretty good. Check rugs, loose rugs on the floor, everybody knows that's a hazard for falling. Handrails on the stairways, that's very important. Grab bars in a bathroom. It's hard for you to get off the toilet at an older age with limited mobility and limited strength, and that will help them function. Good lighting anywhere. They say in the entryway and stairs, but that's true. Grabbers to reach items that are unsafe distances, high or low. Smoke alarms. I told you yesterday that their sense of smell is reduced, and so by the time they pick things up, it might be too far advanced. Get a medical alert system for emergencies. Couldn't emphasize that one enough. Is to have some kind of either a bracelet or a pendant necklace where you can push the button for a call for assistance. You know, people live alone. They could have a fall one day, and that could be, they might not be discovered for a couple days because there's enough isolation out here now that how would you get help? 8, properly stored and organized medications. That's a big one. You wouldn't believe the rat nest of things that people can leave around, and it's dangerous, just highly dangerous. Schedule frequent visits from neighbors and family for safety, just to know that somebody's looking at a person routinely sometimes draws away malicious people. And then finally, get a non-skid shower mat to prevent slips. You know, anymore now, homes are, you know, showers and bathtubs are terrible for older people because you have to get up over the tub to get in. And then if the tub is kind of slick and there's nothing to grab onto, you can fall in the shower. So it's becoming more and more common in homes to just build flat into the bathroom so that you, if you're in a wheelchair, you can get there. Have benches already built into the shower area. Those are very safe and very useful. And to have even sprayers on the shower head so that you can actually wash while you sit. And those things are all really smart things to do. Plus, I think they're actually good even if you're not older. They're just kind of cool things to have. So you'll see that more and more. Bathtubs with showers in them for old people, you probably, if you had the ability, would just take it out and create a safer entry and exit. And also those floors a lot of times will be tiled and not so slick. They'll be rough. If you get rough in a pattern that has enough I guess grooves in it so that the water gets down, makes it easier. But I think that firmness and that rough finish is also like a slate or something like that is really good. Okay. On the next page, assessment for pain. Okay, big part of being old is having to deal with pain. And some people deal with pain better than others. Everybody needs to have pain assessment, and you have to take pain seriously. As I said a little bit earlier, when an older person complains about something, you do have to measure out complaints for the sake of complaining, but you do have to look at what they're complaining about, because very often it is a marker of some new process that's taking place that needs to be addressed. And if you're in pain, your quality of life is very poor, so you do have to address pain management. Aspects of the history of pain. You've got 1 through 7, characteristics of pain, relation to pain, to impairments in physical and social function, what does that do? Analgesic history, what have you taken to manage your pain? Over the counter, prescribed by 4 or 5 different people, because a lot of times old people will shop, and then they have a cabinet full of agents, and they mix and match and can create havoc for themselves. Patients' attitudes and beliefs about pain and management. That's a big one. Sometimes people want zero pain. Their goal is zero pain. I want to feel perfectly normal, no pain at all. And getting that may actually be dangerous for some patients because it may not be possible to make pain go away. So you're looking at what level of pain is tolerable and you're still fully functional. Okay, because you can make pain go away to an extent, to a pretty good extent with medication, but what all are the adverse effects of the medications at that point that the pain has gone away? That could be the fatal event, is just being overdosed on medicine. Effectiveness of treatments, satisfaction with current pain management, and social support and health care accessibility as a result of a person having pain. That's been the big issue with my mother in the past 3 or 4 months is pain management. She has a very bad back. Her spine's she had a car wreck a long time ago, about 40 or 50 years ago, and the degenerative arthritic changes that happen as those spines break down is bad. Her spines pretty much are just rubbing one on the other, and every nerve root that comes out, can be pressed, so she'll have neuropathic pain and back pain. It's best managed if she can maintain a certain stability and a certain posture, and if she gets out of that or tries to do too much, then it just goes berserk. So she has several things. She does take a narcotic analgesic, mostly just to modify pain perception, but she's actually pretty good about it because I count them fairly routine. I was over yesterday to count them out to see what the average is, and she actually manages that really well. But we put her on gabapentin because she was having a lot of neuropathic pain down both legs, and it was beginning to be notably a problem. And the dose, we started with a teeny tiny, it was a relatively small dose, but it wasn't small enough. She was getting 100 in the morning and 200 milligrams in the evening, okay, just 300, which is still about half the starting dose for anybody coming out with gabapentin. Knocked her out. I mean, like, messed up bad. I walked in on Sunday afternoon, and she'd been having problems with it, and had slept up until like 10 or 11 the next day when she usually gets up at about 8, 7:30 or 8. couldn't get herself put together, and just felt groggy all the time. And I walked in, and she was actually in her chair with her head down, and was out, and I called out, and she didn't respond. I thought she's dead. I mean, she looked dead, lifeless, and just kind of over, and I thought, this is it, this is it. And I went over, and I touched her, and she woke up and just so out of it. So I said, you gotta stop taking this. She had done it for like 2 days, and it was a total disaster. So we pulled it off, stopped it, went to ground zero, and got back to normal functioning. Pain came back. It actually did work. It was actually really, it made a difference, but functionality was terrible. She was very unstable. She felt like she was going to fall. And I said, okay, we got to redo this. We'll rethink about it. So I talked to her interns. We're kind of debating it. And I said, it did work, but the dose was too much. The adverse effects were just overwhelmingly unsafe. And that's all we do is make her fall. And if she falls and breaks a bone, that's it. I told her that'll be it. It'll be the beginning and the end. So we backed it off, and we came back and we dosed her on 50 milligrams. She used a suspension because the capsules are hundreds on up, hundreds to 300s. Put her on a suspension, put her on 50 milligrams at bedtime only, just at bedtime. And it's working fantastic. And she wakes up at the usual time, and her pain is modified. So 1/6 of what she was on has turned out to be acceptable without disorientation, without neurologic impairment, of a dangerous sort, and her cognition is still good. So I feel like we kind of okay for now. So now we're just going to ride this train for a while and see what happens. But those are the kinds of things that can happen. Is an overprescribing for pain management to make pain go away. She could have fallen. She could have fallen in her house. Something bad could have happened, and then that would be because of treatment of pain. So things could happen. Important aspects of physical exam and assessment of pain are listed. You've got to look at the site of pain and common sites for pain referral. Her pain is really not right where the source of it is. It actually refers to different parts of her back and her legs, but it's coming from this root source here. So you have to look at that. Usually musculoskeletal system is involved, almost always. You have to look at neurologic system for weakness and dysesthesias, odd, not normal feeling sensations. Observe physical function. What can they do, and what is pain preventing them from doing? Do you see they give a certain way? Do they avoid certain movements because of it? The psychological function, what is it doing to a person's psychology if they are in chronic pain? Now, before we did this gabapentin thing, she was in so much pain that she never has said this to me before. She said, if this is the way it is, I think I'm ready to go. Okay, now that kind of scares me because she wouldn't do anything to herself, but what it meant is that it's so bad, I don't want to be like this every day. It's okay to go. And I said, well, we're not done. You're not done and we're not done. Let's see what we can do. And so that was part of that moving forward. But that again is part of the psychology of pain management. What is it doing to a person's orientation to even being here in a good way or a negative way? And then cognitive function. Well, cognitive function was fine. On the medication overdose, it was not fine. So you're always looking at cognition, psychology, neurologic, musculoskeletal function, and sources of pain and where they might be referred as part of the evaluation. Okay. You know about pain assessment. You can use a visual scale or the 1 to 10 measurement, the verbal scale, and y'all do that pretty routinely in your management. Have you ever used the visual pictures? You done that? Cancer centers, a lot of time we use that. Children, you can do pictures. Sometimes that's helpful for them if they're not really oriented towards numbers like we are. You get the little faces that show how bad is your pain on most days. You might see it used there. Okay. Any questions about pain assessment? I think the biggest thing is don't ignore pain when a person tells it to you. Don't write it off as it's just part of arthritis in an old person. It's just you're complaining. You have to listen. There's psychology beyond all that, but you do need to pay attention to pain. Nutritional assessment, we're not going to do a big to-do on nutritional assessment. You had that in nutrition early, but in older people, it's very important to pay attention to nutrition, especially if that person is still trying to live independently. What are they doing? When they're in assisted living where they can eat, they still can get nutritionally deficient if the food's no good. And very often, older people don't like food in facilities where they are. My mother hates the food. Everybody hates the food. A part of it is their taste is not the same. Their taste and has altered enough that food is not the way they remember it, so therefore it's no good. So that a lot of times older people will overseason things just so that they load it with salt just so it tastes like salt. Okay? Because ordinarily we get a little bit of sprinkle, we got it, they don't get it. So they're trying to make food taste like it used to. The assessment of body composition, I'm not worried that you know all those things. Everybody understands weight is an assessment of a global component. I'm not worried about those things. Lab measures, probably serum albumin is as helpful as anything, even though there's controversy about how useful all these things are. But albumin is a good indicator of malnutrition after you've excluded the other things that can cause it, like gastrointestinal problems, liver problems. All things being equal, it's helpful. I was going to ask you, Taylor, total lymphocyte count. Y'all ever use that? It's a controversial marker, and it's you still find it listed in geriatric nutritional assessment, but I think it's a plus minus, and you probably would see albumin and just an assessment of body composition and intake more so than total lymphocyte count for that.
In school, yeah, we never even learned total lymphocyte count, but we actually, our teacher didn't really like serum albumin, just because of, and so we were taught as dietitians to like intake, body mass, history.
Look at body mass index, look at the history. And I think all those things being equal, that tells you what you need. And if you had an albumin that was 0.1, okay, that person probably wasted, by then, would be helpful. I think those things alone are not that helpful. They are just helpful in light of every other piece of information that you can gather. I looked at total lymphocyte count again last night because I wanted to see where is that, and it's still controversial. Some people like it, some people don't like it. I don't care if you remember it or not, to tell you the truth. I just wanted to bring it to your attention. Red blood cells also, but that's another. A lot of things waste away when a person does not eat well. Okay, the critical questions and the factors that dictate malnutrition, these are important things to pay attention to. Is there any reason to suspect malnutrition? That is, they don't have money, they can't shop, they're not mobile to go get food and nobody's around them. They're isolated. That's the problem. If so, of what nutrients and to what extent? What are the pathophysiologic mechanisms involved? Like alteration of nutrient intake is probably the most common, but digestion and malabsorption problems can also be problematic. There's so much more focus on gastrointestinal disease and nutrition now than there used to be because we've appreciated more things. That's more focused on now than it used to be. And then what etiology underlies the pathophysiologic mechanisms? Well, now we have, gluten-free foods. That you used to never see that in any large amount, and that's a pretty bit. Now, the factors that place people at risk for malnutrition, drugs are very big. They just alter taste and desire to eat in a number of ways. Those are three, but don't even stop there. Any medication can actually impact appetite. If a person's taken 10 to 12 different medicines or more, and you put all that pill and capsule burden down at one time, they cause nausea and upset stomach. And if the person has eaten nothing before that, it may make them very queasy, and just the thought of food is repulsive. So it's just all of them. I wouldn't remove any. Look at adverse effects of medications, and gastrointestinal upset is on every single one. And it's true because they directly get on your stomach, they irritate. Chronic disease, heart failure, renal insufficiency, chronic gastrointestinal disease, all of those. You know, heart failure causes that stomach congestion. If you back up and you go back to the portal system, that makes you feel heavy and queasy and no appetite, anorexic, don't want to eat. Depression is a problem for eating. Dental and periodontal disease is a problem for eating. Decreased taste and smell, we talked about those. Low socioeconomic group is a key factor for malnutrition, just don't have money. And particularly in this situation, let's say you're a patient who has a number of medications, a fixed income, and your insurance doesn't cover everything. So now you're caught between the dilemma of, do I take my medicines, which I believe actually allow me to live longer, or do I eat food which I need to sustain my body? So people start compromising in the middle of both of those and pick and choose some of the medicines and pick and choose some of the foods and not do well in either one because they don't have the resources to get what they need. That's big. Physical weakness, you can't cook. You can't pick a fork up. You are unable to get out of your chair. One of the biggest reasons for dehydration is immobility. If you can't get up out of your chair to go get water, even though you're thirsty, you might just sit there. Isolation and food fads, in the sense of people eating what they think the good diet is to lose the weight that they want to lose because they're still paying attention to that and they don't get a full set of nutrients. Page 34 is a nutrition assessment. You don't have to look at it. I just want to give you an idea about what it looked like. It just gives you a range of things in a score. So it looks at weight, mobility, it embraces all of those factors in a form, so you kind of look at who's at risk for being malnourished based on how they respond across this assessment. Okay. Any question about those? Okay. You ready to go on? You might get out of here. Okay, some good thing. Okay, this part is important. There's a lot in here that is useful that are distinguishing features of or maybe absent features of disease in people who are older. Atypical presentation is very common in older people, and the reason why things are overlooked, not only by healthcare providers, but also by the patient. So both are going to be tricked a little bit. The number one sign of illness in an old person is change in behavior or functional ability. They don't act the same and they don't do the same things. Doesn't seem like it's always connected. You might think depression, and it could be, but it could be an indicator of any number of other different diseases. Okay. There are 4 risk factors listed for atypical presentation. The common risk factors for having an atypical presentation is people who are 85 years of older. So the more advanced the age is, you have to get more and more into atypical presentation. Multiple medical conditions, called multimorbidity, multiple medications, polypharmacy, and cognitive or functional impairment. When you have all of those together, your risk for an atypical presentation of a disease is fairly high. And that's almost every older person. When you get over 85, they'll be there. Okay. Now there's some questions some common symptoms and some common questions. These are not directly related, they're just the ones to look at. The symptoms that you have to ask for specifically, so look at those. Acute confusion, they're just more confused. And it might not seem like a lot of confusion, but it could be some. If, for example, you're talking to a person and they're almost always, they know where they are, and all of a sudden they can't quite remember where they are, but everything else seems okay, that's subtle early confusion. We might just kind of give them that one, but don't. Okay, it might be a sign. Anorexia, change in appetite, they stop eating. It's like this sounds terrible, it's almost like an animal. When an animal, like a dog, stops eating, look for stuff. Because I've had several of my animals who've died, the first sign was just not eating. My dogs love their food. And when you put down food, the dog doesn't want to eat it. Okay, maybe one meal, you feeding them too much snack food or whatever. But if they go 2 or 3 and they're not eating, there's something wrong with that animal. And in people, it's no different. If people stop eating, you need to figure, that's a sign, okay? They might otherwise look okay, but they don't want to eat. Absence of fever, okay, that's a symptom. It wouldn't make you check for anything. You think they're okay, but just because they're absent of fever doesn't mean something's not wrong. Absence of pain or pain in alternate locations, mood somewhere. Generalized weakness and fatigue. My mother is this way. What it will happen is she won't eat as much, and she'll say she's tired, and she won't move as much. That's it. It's just that subtle. So it's like, are you getting up, moving around? Is everything the same? Blah, blah, blah. It's like, yep, okay, I think you're okay. If that's not happening, then it's like, okay, I'll start digging down for more questions to kind of screen it. New urinary incontinence, like they're peeing on themselves and I can't get to the bathroom fast enough. Or functional decline, they can't move around or do some things. Okay, some other questions you can ask the patient or the people around them. Is the patient usually quiet and non-conversant, or is this a change? So it's just change in presentation. Have you noticed the patient to be more fidgety or more hyperactive? Has there been any weight loss? Are there any new medications that were started when the symptoms started? So that time course is important. When the patient has had an infection, what signs have they had? So that's like, remember the way they are when they have something that's diagnosed, because when you see that again, that might be what that is. And that has turned out to be true for my mother with urinary tract infections. It's pretty, doesn't eat, less energy, can't get out of bed easily, that's it. So I'll check it. That's a good sign, and so far it's worked. I see the patient is in a wheelchair. Can the patient walk, or is this a new change when people start getting too weak to the place of not being able to get around? Okay. Let's look at some of these atypical presentations on page 36. These are some interesting. Infectious disease. Look at what they have. Absence of fever. You almost never think that's the case, but that's true. They don't have fever. Sepsis without the usual leukocytosis and fever. So they don't have an increased white count, and they don't have a fever. So you're like, what? Okay, they're not eating, they're weak, they're not moving around. They fall. Okay, a lot of times if somebody goes into the ER because they fell at home, you need to do a full evaluation, because why they fall? Did something happen? Because it could be a light stroke, it could be an infection that made a weakness, and so there's something else going on many times. Decreased appetite or fluid intake, confusion, change in functional status. Now those are all very subtle. Those are not at all overwhelmingly what you think, but that could be it. Look at silent acute abdomen, absence of symptoms, no presentation, so how do you even know? Like what? Mild discomfort and constipation. Constipation is always a big symptom in an older person, new onset constipation, and some tachypnea and possible vague respiratory symptoms. That's pretty out there, pretty vague, pretty limited. Silent malignancy, going to give you back pain secondary to metastases from slow-growing breast masses in a woman. Silent masses of the bowel. Okay. Silent MI. These are kind of bothersome. Absence of chest pain. No chest pain, but you have an MI. Vague symptoms of fatigue, nausea, and a decrease in functional status. Classic presentation, shortness of breath is a more common complaint than chest pain. If you have that, it may be nothing. Just weak, don't feel good, didn't feel good yesterday. MI. Non-dyspneic pulmonary edema. May not subjectively experience the classic symptoms of paroxysmal nocturnal dyspnea or coughing. Typical onset may be insidious with change in function, food or fluid intake or confusion. So you see these symptoms are all so similar. They're just kind of the same type of presentation. Thyroid disease, hyperthyroidism presents as apathetic thyrotoxicosis. That is fatigue and a slowing down. Okay, that's interesting. And hypothyroidism, confusion, agitation. Those are not at all typical presentations. Depression, not sad. Somatic complaints, appetite changes, vague GI symptoms, constipation, sleep disturbances, organic symptoms. They're hyperactive. You know, you may not think depression with hyperactivity, but it could be. Sadness, misinterpreted as a normal consequence of aging. And medical problems that mask depression, and a lot of things. And then your other, on page 37, medical illness that presents as depression, for example, hypothyroidism could be decreased energy and apathy. So what's notable about all of those? Not much. Okay, I think they're all pretty much not much types of symptoms that you can look for. What's notable is changes from the baseline. That's why that continuous evaluation and dialogue with a person is probably more helpful than anything else to pick up when is it different, because that might be the only thing that tips you off to explore things further. Okay. And let's look at these last few. Dehydration. Do y'all want to finish and get out of here? Or, okay, let's on out of here and then give you a little bit longer lunch. You kind of come to. Dehydration. It's the most common fluid electrolyte disturbance in an older person. Dehydration, very common. It may be constipation or slight orthostatic hypotension, if even that. You can't really do skin turgor on older people because they've lost a lot of the elasticity anyway. So when you're trying to pinch up and see if it stays pinched up, everything stays pinched up all the time. Doesn't really go back tight. So you lose that part. And oral dryness, you could see that, you could look at that. But they're not always reliable changed. Okay, the reason it happens, we talked about these physiologic changes earlier. They have a decrease in total body water naturally. They have altered thirst perception, and they do not have the ability to concentrate urine at the collecting tube, so that they're less responsive, so they don't really hold on to fluid as well. Some of the factors that can lead to it: infection can dehydrate a person, can lead to it. Tube feedings, okay? Tube feedings tend to be osmotic, and they tend to draw fluid into the bowel, and they may just have diarrhea and go through and lose fluid that way. Medication side effects, mobility disorders because they can't get to water, delirium because of decreased fluid intake. Vital signs may not be revealing. They're often taking medications to block it. You think when somebody's dehydrated that their heart rate's fairly fast, you know, they're tacking away their blood pressure, they will tilt, and their blood pressure will, their heart rate goes up, but very often they're on medications that don't let you pick those things up, so you don't see it so much when you're doing the evaluation. Infection. Look at it, the infection things. It can be present without fever, like we said, and it may be present with fever and white cell count, but more is just as likely not. No fever, no elevation of white count, no localizing signs. Now, even without an increased white count, there may be a left shift. Okay, so sometimes you might see a left shift. So if you're looking at differentials, maybe that indicates something. If you had sequential ones, you could look at it and see. Older adults usually have lower basal temperature. Okay, that was one of the physiologic changes. So they're not operating like we are at 98.6. So if they go up just a little bit, like 99.14, that may likely be a sign of infection because they tend to run a little bit lower anyway. So that's another kind of a trick to pay attention to. Changes in mental status we talked about. Urinary tract infections are often confusion, incontinence, anorexia, maybe dysuria, maybe frequency, maybe not. Usually not. And then pneumonia, just malaise. All the other findings are incomplete or unexpectedly mild for what you're looking at. Okay. Cardiac disease, we've already talked about that one. Mild pain, complete absence of pain, usually no shortness of breath, very atypical. Usually it's just new fatigue, dizziness, or confusion. So just think about that. You know, we keep talking about dizziness, confusion, change in status. So if you have a person in a nursing home and everybody's kind of not that oriented, if you have a lot of old people around, you might miss things pretty easily because you can't be suspicious about every single thing like this. They're vague enough. That's why things get missed. Heart failure may present as fatigue and loss of appetite without breathlessness. And then finally, depression. We'll look at that more this afternoon. Common problem in old people, up to 36% of outpatients and 40% of hospitalized patients. That's a lot of older people, really 1 in 3 to almost 1 in 2 have depression. It is part of it. It's just deterioration of normal synaptic function that makes a person predisposed. Yeah.
The cardiovascular disease, my nana had a heart attack, 99% occlusion in one artery and 97 in the other. All she had was indigestion. That was her symptom.
Yep.
And they worked out in the yard the weekend before, so she was short of breath, but she was thought it was because she
had worked out
Yeah.
and kind of pushed it too much. It's a good thing you don't hear. Yeah, it is crazy. So it's true. This is real. It can actually happen. In depression, the atypical symptoms in old people, anxiety may be it. If someone becomes more anxious than usual with no particular reason, diminished self-care, lack of interest, irritability, weight loss, some new cognitive impairment, and more somatic complaints, or insomnia, all of those. A lot of times you see that it's just being old, but actually it could be depression. So you see a lot of primary care providers. I don't know that I think depression is overtreated in old people, but I think they are worth trials. If you see these vague symptoms, it's worth a trial to see if it makes a difference. But what I think is even more important, it's okay to try an antidepressant therapy because more often than not, that's part of their presentation. But if they don't get better, you can get rid of it. That's the other part, is if you start somebody on a medicine like that and they don't notably improve in their behavior or their function from the baseline, then why are you leaving that medicine on there? Because it just increases risk for more problems later on. So sometimes it's worth a trial. If it's worth a trial, define the time period and call the ball game if that time period it doesn't improve with appropriate dose titration that's tolerable, then pull it off. You really haven't changed anything, they're still the same. But now you have the risk of the medicine. So think trial, think endpoint, think removal, so that you don't end up with one more in the medicine cabinet to get confused about. Okay, any questions? No? Okay, we did it. Good for us.